The Dave Hooker Show. A presentation of Off the Hook Sports. Objective insight, expertise, top guests. Available on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the Off the Hook Sports app. Download now for free. Also available on offthehooksports.com.
I compute and obey.
Now to Dave Hooker.
Ready.
We are off and running to begin a huge week as the SoftVols didn't really surprise anybody because they did exceptionally well and they advanced. And then the Diamond Vols did kind of surprise some people based off where they were headed, and kudos to them. So a big lineup on tap as we're going to discuss four downs. Josh Heupel versus other second-year coaches in UT history. But help me with that because I was thinking about our production meeting. He would be a third-year UT coach in UT history. So, Caleb, after our 3:15 a.m. production meeting, I have a question. So how are we positioning this later in the program?
Oh, we are comparing Josh Heupel we are comparing his second year to that of other second-year coaches in Tennessee history, what they've done in their second years.
Gotcha.
And spoiler alert, Lane Kiffin did make the list.
No, he did not make the list because he didn't make it to year two. Also, today's tough question. Urban Meyer calls the NIL a fancy word for cheating. That'll be what the H? And Josh Heupel versus Brian Kelly, who's better schematically? This should be an interesting conversation because I do like a little bit of the old school pro style type of approach to knock Josh Heupel whatsoever. And then before we get into it, predicting the Vols' 8-game conference schedule for 2024, because we got into scheduling info and we got into the 8-team permanent playoff model, the 9-team permanent playoff model. And we both agreed that Caleb, essentially, the SEC, who is pretty definitive for the most part in their decisions, got a little bit wishy-washy. So they'll go 8 in 2024, which I don't think is what they want to do long-term. Good morning to everyone. Hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed, do that as well. So what do you got, Caleb? Let's go ahead and get to today's tough question, predicting Tennessee's 2024 schedule, which will be just right around the corner. Today's tough question brought to you by crafttreats.com.
Today's tough question. Take a side. Take a stand. The Dave Hooker Show, a presentation of offthehooksports.com.
All right, so we'll predict Tennessee's 8-game conference schedule, and it's brought to you by Craft Treats. Go to crafttreats.com, use the promo code OFFTHEHOOK, and you will get 20% off any of their fine products, all homemade, holistic there. But they've got the CBD derivatives where they can take care of your pet's anxiety issues, arthritis issues, or digestive issues. They are awesome. So they're the chill pills. Use the promo code OFFTHEHOOK and you get 20% off any of their products. So predicting the Vols' 8-game conference schedule in 2024. A lot of these schedules are still up in the air, right, Caleb? Because we just now decided as a region, a conference, that on Friday it would be an 8-game schedule instead of a 9-game schedule, which I think is a shame. So when we look at Tennessee's schedule, what do you think?
So my guess is, based on things I've heard, because this is such a stopgap moment, because really they just couldn't come to an agreement, I do believe they're going to keep all the rivalries they can intact for 2024, which leads me to believe that Tennessee is going to still be playing Vanderbilt, Kentucky, Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. I think they're going to play all 5 of those games next year.
They had better, and if that's your stopgap, then I can roll with that. I hate that they're even having to use a stopgap. I think it's a sign of some troublesome leadership at the top. I don't want to call it incompetent because I think Greg Sankey does a great job for the most part. But yes, this is not a good sign that Tennessee and the other SEC schools are a little unsure about their schedule past 2024. So I hope it's as close to what Tennessee had last year, because I like all of the rivalries pretty much except for Missouri, to be real honest with you. Missouri could fall off the face of the earth and I would be fine with that. But I hope it pretty much stays status quo and stays the same. And isn't that part of the reason that you're doing this stopgap situation in 2024? I would think.
Yeah, that's the big reason. And I'm with you. I like the rivalries. Even people are going to call me crazy. I know Tennessee Kentucky is not a rivalry in football, but it's a college sports rivalry in the sense that Tennessee dominates Kentucky in football, Kentucky dominates Tennessee in basketball. And basically, where the rivalry comes into play is one team likes to try to get the better end of upset the other team in one of the other sports, basically.
Okay, so let's do this for just a second if we can. What are the rivalries that Tennessee has? Because Tennessee, and listen, if you're another school we mention, don't take this as any sort of insult, or if you're another school we omit, don't take this as an insult, because Tennessee is a weird school that has a ton of rivalries, right? I mean,
they have a ton of rivalries and no like natural Michigan, Ohio State style of rival.
Or I was going to use Auburn, Alabama. I mean, there's no, this is a rival that can't go away. They're all like, these are good rivals. Yeah, it's like that date you go on, you're like, yeah, that was a good date. That wasn't a great date. It's not like I met my soulmate, and it wasn't a complete dump either where I'm never going to call the other person back. But they're all kind of really, really good dates where you're like, there's a possibility there. So Tennessee, Kentucky is a rival because partly of basketball. Tennessee, last I checked, was number 2 overall in basketball wins in the SEC to Kentucky. That's been a couple of years old, so somebody could have surpassed that. But Tennessee was number 2. So that's kind of a combo guard rival thing. Vanderbilt, if you're over 70 years old, that's a huge rival, and it's in-state. Georgia, to win the East, has become an incredible rival. Same thing for Florida, even more so because Florida had a guy named Steve Spurrier that had Tennessee ties. Alabama, we know Tennessee, Alabama. South Carolina, to me, is not a rival at all. But the ones that I mentioned, and tell me if I'm leaving somebody out, which would be Georgia, Florida, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Alabama, all have a strong argument that they should be on Tennessee's schedule. Let me hear from the message board, and you tell me what you think. But those are the ones I would hate to lose. And then after that, you can just kind of rotate people in, whether it's the LSUs or the South Carolinas. Again, I'm talking in fantasy world. This is what I would want to happen, Caleb. This is not what I'm predicting will happen.
Yeah, it's going to be even when it goes to 9 games, it's going to be a 3-6 model. So you're going to have to get rid of 2 of those rivalries. My guess is Tennessee is going to have to drop. They're going to have to drop Florida, Kentucky, and Georgia because by default, the SEC needs 3 teams for South Carolina to play permanently. And I think Tennessee is going to be one of those teams. And so it'll be Tennessee, it'll be South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Alabama. As for next year, I think they can keep all 5 of those games for next year at the very least. And honestly, next year, bring some old rivalries back. You got a little bit of flexibility with an 8-game schedule. So have Tennessee play Ole Miss and Auburn too next year.
Well, I'm fine with that. But when we look to 2025, what are going to be the rivals? Are we going to be all back in this debating once again, or are we going to figure out what's best and then go with that this year?
We're going to be all back in it in 2025. And it's going to be who will either it'll stick at 8 games, which is just going to be they can't. I don't know if they can stick at 8 games, or we're going to see them go to 9 games and there will be a 3-6 format. And at that point, it'll be who should Tennessee's 3 permanent opponents beat. And it'll be a debate amongst those 5 or somebody else. I think the 2 most untouchable Tennessee games are Alabama and Vanderbilt. Say what you want about Vanderbilt. It's the 4th most played game in the SEC. No one's touching the Vanderbilt game. I don't care what people feel about it. They're not going to touch it.
No, and I don't think Tennessee wants that to go away. Because, again, you and I have debated recruiting the mid-state area. I do think it's going to end up being good. I could be proven wrong, but I think within 2 or 3 years, you're going to see a bubble there, and you're going to see that be a good recruiting area. So if you're Danny White, what do you want the 3 games to be? Let's assume that it goes 9 games after 2024. Surely to goodness it will, right?
Yeah, it would have to. I think if you're Danny White, you want Alabama, Vanderbilt, and this is where you throw tradition aside. I think you want Georgia because you talked about recruiting. You want to be able to go into Georgia every other year and play football.
I
just for
agree.
recruiting purposes.
I agree. And I know we talked to Cooper and Jacob, but they're not the only ones. I talked to former players. They don't want the schedule to get easy just because it can and it could. I mean, you could say Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Alabama, and that's not going to be the three, but you could say those three, and that would be pretty easy and be a benefit to Tennessee. But the players that I talked to and the former players, they want to play the tough ones. You mentioned Georgia. I agree with you, but I don't want to agree with you. I take Georgia just slightly over Florida because, I grew up in the Florida series time. So emotionally, I'd rather have Florida. But from the standpoint that you're talking about of recruiting, if you got to play a tough perennial program, and Georgia's better than Florida now, but you don't know what it's going to be like in 5 years. If you'd rather play a tough perennial program that's in the East, what remains of it, then it's got to be Georgia because you want the recruiting exposure there.
Oh, I agree. And I never thought about that in the past. And it didn't hit me until you've talked to me about more than anybody about how much Tennessee relied on South Carolina to win the national title in 98. Well, what happened? South Carolina joined the SEC in 1992. And I'm pretty sure Tennessee playing South Carolina every other year in South Carolina helped them recruit that state pretty well. And I never thought about the concept that playing schools like that. And then in basketball, I don't know if you know this, John Calipari, when he took over Memphis back in 2000, he canceled series with Ole Miss and Tennessee. And he had a good point. Memphis has very good high school basketball talent. And he was like, why should I let these schools come into Memphis to recruit talent when we have to go to their places? And it's not like you can go to Knoxville and recruit the same level of talent. And
no, he was right. Nobody wanted to hear it, but he was exactly right. I wouldn't have played Tennessee if I were in Memphis.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want them coming in to recruit your players.
Yeah, I mean, if I had the option, I wouldn't play Tennessee if I were Vanderbilt's head coach.
In basketball?
Yeah.
Or football? Yeah. No,
if I had the option, I mean, you don't, but if you did, I mean, why? Because again, I think Nashville's a growing city. We can debate whether or not it's going to be a great recruiting city.
It is great in basketball recruiting already. It's already a great basketball recruiting place.
Right. So I don't want you dudes in there wearing your snazzy orange jerseys, running around the Memorial Coliseum and having players in the Nashville area think, I'd rather go there. They look a lot cooler than that gold and brown stuff that Vanderbilt uses.
Yeah.
I mean,
what Calipari tried to do.
Honestly, give me, no offense, Vanderbilt fan, but other than the degree, give me one reason to go to Vanderbilt. Anybody on the message board. I might give away a Hooker t-shirt or a Kraft Treats gift certificate.
And it ain't like hookers are a good reason to go to Vanderbilt because Tennessee is a little bit not, they're never going to legalize that. So
it's right. Now, everybody think about it. I guess the town is pretty cool. I guess. I don't
Nashville
know.
Being in Nashville. I mean, being in Nashville is really cool. I do love Nashville.
But yeah, but I haven't been to Nashville in so long. There's a matter of time that it's coming. It's either this year, next year, or it's within 5 years. Travis says Nashville is bleeping awesome. Yeah, but we're going to show up before long, and it's going to be like Atlanta from the 90s to the 2000s to me. Whoa, it got too big. It's going to be like downtown Gatlinburg from the 90s to now, and it's like, whoa, it got too crowded.
It's funny. So one of my friends, a really good friend of mine, he's African-American, lives in Atlanta. He's like, I feel like Nashville's like white people's Atlanta. That's what he said.
It's actually a pretty good comparison. Jacob Warren, what should people do with this channel?
What's up, everybody? This is Jacob Warren asking you to like, subscribe, and share. Dave needs this.
He certainly does. All right, let's move forward. Where that was today's tough question. We predicted the Vols' 8-game conference schedule in 2024. We forgot to use the element, so we might use it later. What the H? Talking Urban Meyer. Why does Urban Meyer make what the H and he's not even a coach? This is like the second time in a month. What the H?
What the? What was he thinking?
Release the hounds.
The Dave Hooker Show.
Keep cool.
A presentation of offthehooksports.com.
Urban Meyer, you silly, silly, silly man. He calls the NIL a fancy word for cheating. Nope. What you had was a fancy word for being immoral. You had 85 scholarship athletes that weren't getting paid, and they should have based off of their physical prowess, based off what they brought to the university. That, my friend, was cheating. It shows how sociopathic that Urban Meyer can be. Listen, we can debate NIL if it's good for college football, if it could end up being the end of college football. I get that. But the simple laws of our land in the United States of America, you bring something to the table, you're worth something. So no, NIL is not a fancy word for cheating. What they were doing before NIL was a fancy word for cheating. And I know a lot of people use the term slavery, and I think that's an unfair term because of the abuses of slavery. But a lot of people have used that in the past. I'm not going to go that far, but that was cheating, making someone go out and perform a job for free because you have the market cornered for somebody that wants to make it to the NFL and be a professional football player. That is cheating. And it went on for like 80 years. That's cheating.
It's absolutely cheating. And I don't know where to go with this, to be defensive of NIL or to just wonder, to debate the nerve of Urban Meyer of all people to take any morality stance in college football. The guy who had a wife beater on his staff and knew about it and didn't tell anybody. The guy who was letting his players at Florida steal laptops, kill people, threaten their girlfriends, and not suspending them. The guy who let one of his players try to blind a football player on the field and then say, I'll suspend him for a half of next game, but, whatever. I mean, this is the guy that did not care about it. And by the way, you texted me over the weekend. There's a 30 for 30, not a 30 for 30, a Netflix documentary coming on just how immoral Florida was.
I saw that. That's bizarre.
Yeah. They were infamous for cheating. And here comes Urban Meyer. He says the collectives are a fancy way of cheating because of the recruiting. One, let's talk about this. Urban Meyer won his national titles at Florida. He got a lot of help from Ron Zook's recruiting. Dave, you covered recruiting at the time. There was a lot of suspicion about Ron Zook, wasn't there, when he was recruiting at Florida?
Yes.
Exactly. So it's the nerve of Urban Meyer, who benefited from not the fancy way of cheating, but I believe the old-fashioned way of cheating. And on top of that, to benefit from his fancy way of cheating, which is to say, I will let my players abuse and harm anybody, and I don't care as long as they win me championships. He needs to
I'm with you.
Sit down and shut up.
I think we're both dead right for two different reasons. Okay, so I'm going to go the history of it, and I'm not going slavery, but I'm going to say to some extent indentured servitude is what it was, because you didn't have another option. At least in the NBA, you could go to Europe for a year, right, and then come back.
Right.
You didn't have another option. It was really disgusting. And listen, it ruined countless, and when I say countless, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of players' ability to make money at football because they weren't great students. And I'm sorry, I'm going to stand up for those guys. That's a fact. Caleb, he may not be able to add up numbers, but he produces value because he's a great writer and he's great at video editing. He does so many other things. So to say that, oh, you're not great at this, so you can't succeed at this job. He actually happens to be really good at numbers too. But if I said that would just be stupid, that would be stupid on a whole different level. And it was legislated. And the fact that Caleb went in another direction and is even more correct than I am, that you cannot go out and call out people that are unethical when you ran one of the most unethical programs in the history of modern day college football in terms of programs that matter. There may be somebody doing it at West Virginia North State via the I-24 corridor school university. But as far as programs that matter, who's been any dirtier taking out moral things like Penn State and that sort of thing and Michigan State, okay? But who's been any dirtier other than those totally immoral schools on the college football scale? Who's been worse? Who's been worse?
Yeah, nobody. It's not even close. Urban Meyer towers above everybody. And he's been a fraud like this for a while. I don't know if you know this, but this was about when Jameis Winston was at Florida State. Urban Meyer had the nerve, I kid you not, to go on Bill O'Reilly when O'Reilly was still on Fox News and say, it'd be really hard for me to let a player like Jameis Winston on my team. Really? Really, Urban? It'd be really hard for you to let a player like Jameis Winston on your team. I mean,
He'd be stacking cash for him to be on his team. He would be stacking up cash bigger than that alligator that was on Naked Jim McElwain. He'd be stacking up 850 pounds of bull shark cash is exactly what he would be doing. Travis says Nashville, Kid Rock's. You can throw a rock on Broadway and it will hit the best bar you've ever been to in your life. So I'm calling some people to have like a fan party, not necessarily for SEC Media Days, because no fans go to that because it's just a bunch of dudes talking to each other. But, you have the Virginia game. So I'm looking for a place to hold a little a party for Off the Hook Sports. So there would be no better place to do it than Kid Rock. I don't know how to get in touch with Kid Rock, but if anybody does, let me know. For the record, Foo Fighters, a couple of weeks for us. My wife has okayed the $170 price ticket, but I found 8th row tickets for Kid Rock in Nashville. They're about $500. She hasn't okayed that yet. Should she okay that, Caleb?
No, because Kid Rock railed back in the day against artists who charge too much for their concerts, and look what he's doing now. Sell out.
I thought you told me that Ticketmaster got their claws in that or something.
Yeah, but Kid Rock was like, what Kid Rock was taking the stance on, I won't perform at the venues that do that. Well, it looks like you're going to perform at the venues that do that, Kid Rock. And also, I don't like Kid Rock's whole fake redneck persona. You grew up in the suburbs of Detroit, okay? And you're pretending like you're some country boy who grew up in the rural areas of No, you are a suburban kid. He pretended to be some hip hop kid in the 90s, from inner city Detroit. He's not. Now he pretends to be some redneck. He's not. Although, to be fair, kind of fits in with Nashville, because the one thing Nashville is it's like a fake redneck town. It's a bunch of kids who grew up in the suburbs that pretend they grew up redneck. Same way Atlanta.
Most of the people there aren't even from Tennessee.
Exactly. By the way, Fred White will kill me on this. Atlanta's the same way with hip hop. A lot of kids who grew up pretending to be from the hood, but they really grew up in the suburbs, like John Morant.
If you see Kid Rock in concert, it will change your life.
Oh, I'm sure he's musically he's very talented, and I'm sure he would be great in concert. I just don't like the fake redneck persona. I never like it. I didn't like it when Kenny Chesney did it. Okay, I didn't like it when these country music artists put on makeup and cowboy hats and tight jeans and pretend they grew up redneck when in reality they grew up in the suburbs and privileged as heck, and they never worked a day in their life for anything.
I thought you were a big Taylor Swift person.
She doesn't fake being a redneck. She owns being pop.
Okay, 2 minutes. And how does Josh Heupel compare to other second-year coaches in SEC football? In Tennessee football history? He does all right. Let's just say that. 2 minutes back. Josh Heupel's stance in history. I think you'll be pretty impressed when we look back at the former Tennessee coaches that have been in his shoes heading into year 2, because last year was year 2, and they won 11 games. Stay tuned. Off Thug Sports.
And Craving Wings South North Shore location, where we've heard people say that you can get the best wings in East Tennessee. Pero ¿quién es este? El número 87, Jacob Warren.
I'll just do 6 in my sauce 87, please.
Imposible, señorita. Dale 6 más. Look at these wings. Perfectas, deliciosas, fantásticas.
Man, I don't know what you're saying, but it sounds awesome. How do you say fresh, never frozen in Spanish?
Frescas, nunca congeladas. Make your way to Craving Wings and get you 6 más.
But what was funny about Kate is we were a full continuum of care at that time. We had detox, we had inpatient, we had outpatient. So we were doing a lot of the things that we do now. But now we just do them so much better. It's really a simple program, but we're complicated people. I am what I am, and now I got to do something about it.
You can take your life back. Call Cadis today.
Got cataracts? We can fix that. Never miss another moment. With a little help from Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn at cctis.com.
Do you want to own the more that owns every job? Then get to Vassey Lawn and Garden in Cleveland and get you a Toro. I'm David Vassey, here to talk to you about Toro. With a Toro Zero turn, you'll get more out of every minute and you'll reach the finish line faster. At Bassey's, we like to say, no matter if you're mowing 3 acres a week or 11 lawns a day, homeowners and business owners alike find confidence in equipment they can trust from top to bottom.
Bassey Lawn and Garden, Highway 60 North in Cleveland.
Man alive, it's worth the drive.
Our family has been creating jewelry since 1986, each piece unique with a story all its own. I'm Rick Terry with Rick Terry Jewelry Designs. I'm a jeweler, and I want to be your jeweler. We're grateful that you chose us to be Knoxville's best jeweler. My family and staff look forward to serving you. So please come see us. Kingston Pike and Campbell Station Road in the heart of Farragut and downtown on Gay Street, right next to the Tennessee Theater.
A college football tradition like no other.
Yes, sirree, boys and girls.
Or a guy that just won't leave.
Wow, that is sad.
The Dave Hooker Show, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the free Off the Hook Sports app. A presentation of Off the Hook Sports. Back to Dave Hooker.
So on the surface, year 2, if we had to grade it, looks like what? Caleb Calhoun, it has to be an A+, right? You beat Alabama, you beat Florida, Georgia is Georgia. I don't know. Do you want to say A because of the South Carolina collapse, the Columbia collapse?
It has to be A for 2 reasons. There are second-year coaches that have, there are second-year coaches that have won national titles, including Urban Meyer. Yes, I called him Urban Meyer. But also just relative to Tennessee football history, there are 2 coaches who had better second years than Josh Heupel. Not by much, but if we're judging by championships, they had better second years.
Let's get into that right now, and it will be 4 Downs. 4 Downs is brought to you by Andy Mason of AndyMasonRealEstate.com. Andy Mason of realestate.com is absolutely phenomenal. I will tell you more about him, but first, it is 4 Downs, and it's brought to you by AndyMasonRealEstate.com. Taking a look at Josh Heupel and where he ranks among Tennessee and SEC coaches that have completed their second year. Should be pretty good.
4 Downs. 4 questions. 4 answers. The Dave Hooker Show.
4
Downs. A presentation of OffTheHookSports.com.
Okay, I'm going to start with first down. Pruitt Butch Dooley. And it's brought to you by Andy Mason, AndyMasonRealEstate.com. Go there, save thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, over 40 years of experience in Andy's office. And Andy Mason of AndyMasonRealEstate.com is phenomenal because best service, best prices in the biz. So first down, Pruitt Butch Dooley. How does Heupel's second year compare to those collection of bozos?
Better than all of them. The closest is Jeremy Pruitt, who went 8-5 his second year. Even after that, Georgia State and BYU losses to open up the season. But
so if I made you pick between the 3, strictly based off of their second season, of those 3, had they stayed at Tennessee, which they weren't going to, which do you think had the most impressive second season? Because with Pruitt, you have to factor in, too, that he did win 8 games, but I think we've learned now, hindsight 2020, he brought in some talent.
He brought in talent, and also that was probably the easiest schedule Tennessee ever played. If you go back and look at that game, the SEC East was really, really down at that time. Not that it's much better now, but it was bad. And Pruitt lost to BYU and Georgia State to open up the year that year. And so I would probably say of the 3, the most impressive, it was probably Butch Jones. Butch Jones went 7-6, but Tennessee played a brutal schedule that year. They lost Justin Worley for the season. They had to replace their entire offensive line because Derek Dooley hadn't win a whole recruiting class without an offensive line in 2012. And I give Butch a break. He was dealt a really bad hand in that 2014 season.
All right, so Butch, compared to those 3 guys, gets a
Hey now.
And they get a
You suck.
Second down.
Heupel was way better than all of them, to be fair, but yes.
Yes. Second down, Philip Fulmer. Where does he rank?
So here's my question to you. Do we count Fulmer's second season 1994 or 1993, given the fact that he partially coached in 1992?
Man, I thought you'd go there. I would probably count it 1993 because you didn't have to clear the program hasn't been recruiting at a high level for a while, which you do with most second-year coaches, right? So,
yes.
I mean, and he was in charge for a good part of the year anyway. So I'm going to say 93, but let's take a look at both years on Second Down, brought to you by AndyMasonRealEstate.com.
So 93 was the seventh. It'd be the seventh best second year in Tennessee football history for coaches. There were 6 others.
Pretty good.
It is. But if you do 90, because he went 10-2, but I argue the 93 team underachieved. If you look at the talent on that 93 team, there's no reason they shouldn't have won a national title that year. Honestly, they were loaded with talent.
That seemed, when you ask about year 2, it made it difficult because year 3 to me was kind of like the transitional year where it was Philip Fulmer got his claws in it and that was his team. Whereas 92, you didn't have the year 2 bump in the road. I'm sorry, 93. You didn't have the year bump in the road. That's difficult. Okay, so but anyway,
and 94.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, 94 he went 8-4, and I think people consider that. But everybody, it was a healthy 8-4 season because of what you said. That was a very young team. That was the Peyton Manning class. Everybody knew that the next few years were going to be great. You probably remember, I was too young, but I'm guessing everybody knew the next few years were going to be great after 94, didn't they?
Yeah, you had a really good feel after that. All right, so, and then they followed that up in the 95, 96, 97, 98. The 95 class was the top class in the nation. That was before widespread recruiting rankings, but most people consider that the top class in the nation. AndyMasonRealEstate.com. Third down, Caleb Calhoun. And the question I have for you is, how about a guy named Johnny Majors? Year 2, Johnny Majors. Take me back.
All right, Johnny Majors' second season was not as disastrous as his first, but it was not good. He went 5-5-1. I don't know the sentiment of Tennessee at the time because I wasn't born until 1988, but I wonder, it seemed like Johnny Majors had a long leash for the struggles that happened in the late 70s, early 80s. And I'm guessing it's because of how beloved he was and people understood that Tennessee was so far behind on facilities. Because
that and everybody had a longer leash. Nowadays, if you haven't made an impact by year 3, that's troublesome, right?
Yeah, you're gone if you haven't made an impact by year 3.
Yeah, so back then it was everybody kind of got 5 years. And if you stumbled upon to a good year in 4 or 5, you probably got 7 or 8 years. So I don't think it was just Majors, but the fact that he was a beloved son and had success at Tennessee certainly was a factor. But yes, he got a long, long time to get things turned around, which he did. But let's go to fourth down. General Nealand. How did he do in his second year?
General Nealand had the second best second season in Tennessee football history. He went 8-0-1 that year in 1927, and Tennessee won the Southern Conference, its first Southern Conference title at the time. That year, Tennessee, so for people who don't know the story, General Nealand was hired to even the score with Vanderbilt because Vanderbilt dominated the series.
Right. Not Alabama, not Georgia, not Florida, not Kentucky. It was Vanderbilt. That was the one.
It was Vanderbilt. Yep. In 1926, he lost to Vanderbilt. In 1927, the year I'm talking about, he tied Vanderbilt. From then on, he dominated to the point to where by the time he retired for good, Tennessee had even the score with Vanderbilt. And this was the last year that he wouldn't beat Vanderbilt.
So of the group we mentioned, who had the better second year than Josh Heupel? Is it It's just General Nealand, right?
It's just General Nealand. But General Nealand did not have the best second year in Tennessee football history.
Oh?
That honor rests with, believe it or not, Bowden Wyatt.
Hey now.
who took over in 1955. General Nealon, for those who don't know, was forced into early retirement because of his health issues. He stayed on as athletic director, hired Harvey Robinson, one of his own proteges. Harvey Robinson didn't perform well. He fired him, and then he brings in Bowden Wyatt, who I think had like a lot of success at Wyoming or somewhere like that. And Wyatt
just walked in there with spurs a jangling, the cowboy hat.
I'm your Huckleberry.
And there he is, ready to go.
And it was 1956. Tennessee went 10-1. They lost the Sugar Bowl, but as I've told you guys, bowl games don't matter. Keith Jackson, till the day he died.
Let me tell you about Keith Jackson. Are you doing the announcer?
Yes, the announcer.
Okay.
He claimed that he felt Tennessee should have been declared national champions that year. They finished number 2, won the SEC. Johnny Majors finished second in the Heisman that year. They had a very legendary win against an old rival, Dave, Georgia Tech. That was their signature win that year. They beat Georgia Tech 3-0.
My interview with Keith Jackson, I think it was the same year that Bobby Bowden won the. There was a General Nealon Award and there was a Lindsey Nelson Award that would go out to the best coach and the best broadcaster, and they always showed up because they were big awards. They weren't maybe like the Dodd Award, so to speak, but they were big. And I remember interviewing Keith Jackson, and I said, "What's the one thing you're looking forward to most in retirement?" He goes, "Well, let me tell you, not looking at a clock, not looking at my watch, not worried about it." And I said, "Well, that makes sense because in broadcasting, everything's timed out." He goes, "Oh, you know it. Makes sense." He took a job doing the Pac-12 games 2 weeks later.
He did. I remember that. Oh my God, I got to be honest. When you said not looking at my what, I thought you were about to say not looking at my wife. And I'm like, wow.
Yes. Oh, let me tell you, she slipped a bit. Oh,
couple
Nelly.
other names I want to mention, by the way, before we get out of this topic. Doug Dickey finished in the top 10 his second year, 1965. He did pretty good. And there were Bill Battle, 71, did pretty good, 10-2. John Barnhill, he was mentioned on the message board. John Barnhill, whether he finished in the top 10 his second year, for those who don't know, he coached Tennessee between Neyland's second and third stint, probably weathered the most difficult time period in Tennessee history. This was at the height of World War II, and Barnhill was having to lead the program those 5 years. And Tennessee was very limited in what they could do.
All right, so our guy, Caleb Calhoun, has people getting rowdy, and we discussed this at our 2 o'clock and 40 minutes production meeting this morning, and I knew he would do so, but he's like, "I'm just going to do it because I'm not scared. I ain't never been scared." I was like, "Okay, you do it."
Today's tough question. Take a side. Take a stand. The Dave Hooker Show, a presentation of offthehooksports.com.
I'm curious why you went here. We discussed it in the 2:30 production meeting. Josh Heupel versus Brian Kelly. Who's better schematically? And it's brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. Look at me, no contacts, no glasses as well, because I had the LASIK surgery, and it is fantastic. Local doctors that care about you, cataracts as well. And they've got the individual vision centers for your regular checkup. So you got Josh Heupel versus Brian Kelly. Who's better schematically? Now, if you can define, as we did this morning at the 12:45 a.m. production meeting, if you can define what you mean schematically, do you mean across the board? Do you mean just on offense? You mean offense, defense, special teams? I'm assuming you don't mean putting together a program, which people could argue I've got a scheme of a method for putting together a program, but define what you mean by schematically.
Yeah, I was thinking specifically offense, since they both come from an offensive background. And I'm saying, one game for your life, who do you trust to put together a better offensive game plan?
One game for your life. So I'm entering the SEC championship game, and I've got Brian Kelly of LSU versus Tennessee. I'm not taking Josh Heupel because of what he would do that week, but I think overall his scheme is significantly better. So I would take him not based off game planning, which makes it sound like that. And I'm not knocking him on game planning either. I thought he had a great game plan versus Clemson that took advantage of what Joe Milton III did the best. I'm taking Josh Heupel because the overall scheme. So in other words, 2 supermodels scheduled to attend an event. If one's dress isn't quite as nice as the other, if Brian Kelly outdoes it on dresses, then fine, he gets that. But as a whole, it's Cindy Crawford versus Caleb Giroux.
Caleb Drew will love this. He's from Louisiana. So I guess where you're going, you've educated me on this. What you're saying is Josh Heupel, and this is what makes him similar to Spurrier, because you felt Spurrier had the better scheme in the 90s, but you're not sure he would have been the best game planning week to week.
That is exactly correct. Yeah, I think Josh Heupel is Steve Spurrier redone without the smart aleck tongue. I hate making comparisons that are so cut and dry like that because everybody's different, but I think he is that guy.
So I have to say I agree with you. I think, but I'm going to take a caveat. I think it depends. Josh Heupel's scheme, if they're both coaching NFL teams, I'd take Brian Kelly yesterday, today, tomorrow to run the NFL team over Josh Heupel every day of the week. I wouldn't even think about it. I think his offense translates better.
I would too, but why? Just because it's more fundamentally ground based?
Yeah, it's got more pro style elements.
Okay, before you go too far down that road, let me play devil's advocate, even though I agree with you. Tennessee runs the football, right? We all know that by now. Okay, so are you oversimplifying just a little bit? Again, I agree with you. I'm playing devil's advocate. But are you oversimplifying just a little bit to say that Brian Kelly's offense is more fundamentally based than Josh Heupel's? Because Josh Heupel's offense does run the football.
I think it's the blocking schemes from the offensive line. So this is actually something I give Butch Jones credit for, and I think he got this from Brian Kelly, which is that Brian Kelly runs spread elements, but if you watch his offensive linemen, they're taught to block the way you would block in a pro-style offense. Heupel's offense, yes, he runs the football, but the blocking schemes are very much a spread offense blocking scheme, which is basically take a position, force your defender to that position, not maintain a block. You get what I'm saying? Like Heupel doesn't coach his players. And maybe Cooper Mays will kill us for saying this, but I don't think they're coached to maintain blocks in Heupel's system.
No, it's a leverage thing. Cooper has said that before, and that's why he feels like he's better off going against bigger guys than lighter, quicker guys. He'll tell you that Pitt was more challenging than Alabama, for instance, because it is a leverage game. He's very rarely blocking somebody by himself. No, I think there's something to that. I don't go that far down that road because then you get into Butch Jones territory, and they didn't have a hand on the ground. When I saw that, I was like, that was every bit as big of a red flag as Dave Clawson flipping offensive lines. And when I saw that, seriously, when I saw that Butch Jones didn't even have a guy in goal line with his hand on the ground, I was like, this is trouble. They don't even know how to put their hand on the ground in a 3-point stance. Nobody's asking for a 4-point stance, but for the love of goodness, you're on the 2 and you're standing on 2 feet. So this is nowhere like that, but it is at the very least keeping defenses honest and a little bit more. So to me, it is every bit as fundamentally sound in the college game as anything that Brian Kelly does. I would absolutely take it. And I hate the fact that people say gimmicky and people on the message board think that's a bad thing. Listen, because of the loosey-goosey offensive rules in college, gimmicky should be a compliment. Can we just officially try to change that word from a negative connotation to a positive connotation? I'll take a little gimmicky. Look at what Mike Leach, rest his soul, was able to do, how Mummy was able to do at smaller schools. Yet, that is not Josh Heupel's offense. It may have a twinge of gimmicky, but it's still fundamentally based. That's what it is. And that's why I think Tennessee fans get rubbed the wrong way on the gimmick line, the G word. But the simple fact is, it is a little gimmicky, but most offenses are, even if we want to go back to the wing T, but it's fundamentally sound. So I think Tennessee's got a great thing going.
offenses are gimmicky until everybody does it, and then they're standard. The single wing that Neyland adopted in 1926 was gimmicky. In 1956, it was outdated, and Tennessee was staying committed to it. And they were like, the T formation is just too fashionable, and it's going to go away. And then Tennessee adopted it with Doug Dickey, even though the T formation was the original formation before the single wing. So you're right. I'd like to quote. Have y'all ever seen the documentary on Elizabeth Holmes, the Theranos woman who created like fake blood work for people and went to prison over it?
No, have not seen anything about her.
It's a great documentary. She is a fraud and she belongs in prison, but she had a great quote one time, even though she belongs in prison, which is that first they think you're crazy, then they fight you, then you change the world. That's how offenses work in football. First they think you're crazy, then they fight it, and then everybody's running your offense.
No, I completely agree. When I watch Brian Kelly's offense, pro style is too strong of a word, but I see an offense that is more pro style based, but has little tweaks in it to make it more adept at the college game. Whereas when I look at Josh Heupel's offense, I see a college offense with some pro style approaches, which is have the ability to run the football. I think they're on not completely opposite ends of the spectrum, but opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of the way they approach the offensive game.
Yes, when we see Josh Heupel, we see a scheme. We see, okay, I don't like to use him because you're right, he never adapted, but we see a Mike Leach. Josh Heupel will adapt, so it's not like he's like Mike Leach, but we see it's more scheme-based. You're right. When you see Brian Kelly, you see it's year-to-year, game-to-game based. He adapts his offense to his personnel, and he knows how to. I guess one of the good comparisons would actually be David Cutcliffe, who I thought was a master at adapting his offense based on the personnel he had year to year. And he ran a standard pro style. Brian Kelly is more creative than Cutcliffe, but just that principle that they adapt their offenses, because Cutcliffe went, I will never forget when he just brought up the no huddle in 2007 out of the blue. He had never run it his whole career, but he was like, I got a senior quarterback and a great offensive line that's veteran. I'm going to run the no huddle. And it worked.
Mr. Jones says innovative sounds better. It does. And those two words, gimmicky and innovative, are probably closer together in definition than you might think. Gimmicky to me is what the Ravens ran the first 2 years in Lamar Jackson. Now, Lamar Jackson can throw now, and that was the idea that they were going to develop him into a thrower. So it sounds like an insult now. But Mike Vick at Va Tech, those were gimmicky. Those were taking advantage of very elite running quarterbacks. I don't think that Tennessee is trying to make a 12th man essentially on the field, which is what you're doing. And when you run a guy around a lot at quarterback, you're trying to create, he's not only a quarterback, but he's a potential running back. That's what you're trying to do, is create a 12th man versus the 11 on defense. But I think those two are examples of gimmicky, and you can probably come up with others, Caleb, that was Mike Vick gimmicky because he was special? Yeah, I mean, you'd be stupid not to do something gimmicky with him. Was Lamar Jackson a good enough thrower to not be gimmicky very early in his career? No. So they did that with him to some extent with Jalen Hurts. Now, I think it both developed as throwers, so I'm not painting this broad brush, Caleb, but those to me are gimmicky.
See, I didn't think Mike Vick was gimmicky at Virginia Tech, though. What Virginia Tech did to me, what Frank Beamer did, was similar to what I felt Bobby Bowden did with Charlie Ward, which is I don't think they had a scheme. I think they just had a very dynamic athlete at quarterback, and they basically were like, snap the ball and make something happen.
Yeah, but see that? No, I agree. And Randall Cunningham in the early 90s with the Eagles was the same way. The defense is going to make plays, go out there and scramble around and make something happen 5 times, and Eagles win the game, right? That to me is gimmicky, because when you lose the Vic, you lose even college or pro, and you lose Randall Cunningham, your offense completely stops. If Tennessee this year loses Joe Milton III, Nico's going to step in, and the offense isn't going to completely stop. Maybe just you and I workshopping this thing have defined what's gimmicky and what's not.
That's true. What's innovative versus gimmicky? That's a fair point. So, but then I'm like, okay, Gus Malzahn was innovative. But if Auburn loses Cam Newton in 2010, the offense still stops. You're not going to replace Cam Newton.
Yeah, that is just a special sort of player. That almost goes into a different category. Almost like Mike Vick in Atlanta. I mean, that almost went, and I saw him play firsthand. I was like, this guy's done stuff that I've just never seen personally. I don't like him as a person. By the way, they have a down the road at the Dave and Buster's, they have a place where you can bid on a Mike Vick helmet. And I just, I filled it out as emailed Dave at aspaca.com. So I went down that road of yes, I have not forgot that he abused animals. Is it too soon, too long?
No, I'm one of those people. I do believe it's the biblical Saul to Paul story, and I believe in redemption, but there are some things it's like the level I don't think people understand the level of animal abuse that went on in the dogfighting ring. I mean, they were like electrocuting and drowning dogs after they lost. It was just bad. There's
a specific player that we've chosen not to work with because of things I know about his background, a former Tennessee player. So it's not just where I am. I mean, there's certain things that I can't get beyond. But yeah, I think if you have a Vic or you have a Cam Newton, you take advantage of them. And then when they're gone, you're not going to be able to take advantage of them anymore. So you better have something good to go. So what happened in those particular cases with Frank Beamer? What happened with Gus Malzahn? You had coaches that couldn't continue that offensive success without those very special players. I think the question you have to ask yourself is how in the world did they get those players in the first place? And I would say kudos to both of them for adapting an offense to do things that were special. But still, I look at both of those situations and those were gimmicky because you had a guy that was so special.
Which is where that was different from, for instance, Tom Osborne. Tommy Frazier was the best quarterback to run that offense. But guess what? When Tommy Frazier graduated, Scott Frost came in and he won another national title.
He was just darn fine, wasn't he?
Yep, he was.
Just fine.
And John Chambers could not figure out how to stop him on green. So
yeah, and I don't think Tennessee will be gimmicky if you factor in that they will have a quarterback ready to play. Gimmicky to me is just relying completely on one guy's ability. Or would you call the triple option back in the day like Georgia Tech ran and drove people crazy in the 90s and 2000s? Is that gimmicky?
To me, that was gimmicky only in the sense of, again, here's where the line comes into play. And this may be where Heupel's different from Mike Leach. It's gimmicky if you don't adjust. And the Georgia Tech triple option, Paul Johnson took advantage of the fact that nobody in the ACC was running the triple option. So it's hard to prepare for them that 1 week. I'll give you an example. We'll go to basketball. No one likes to hear this. Bruce Pearl's success at Tennessee was because of a gimmicky system he ran when he first took over. Like, do you know how pressing for 40 minutes in college basketball, that nobody in the SEC was prepared for that. And it was fun to watch.
Yeah, but Arkansas did the same thing. So is that was gimmicky or is that aggressive?
That was gimmicky. What Nolan Richardson did was gimmicky. And he was a great coach. That doesn't mean he's not a good coach, but it was gimmicky. Bruce Pearl, remember, when Bruce Pearl's own recruits came in, he didn't have the same level of success that he had with Buzz Peterson's recruits. Not because Buzz Peterson's recruits were better, but I think the SEC kind of caught up a little bit with what he was doing, which was just like the SEC caught up with Steve Spurrier, by the way, in the late 90s. He won one SEC title his last 6 years after winning 5 in his first 6 years. And I think that's what happened with Pearl. Pearl's still a great coach, succeeding at Auburn. He's innovative as well as gimmicky because he adjusts to he's able to adjust with this system, but his commitment is still to flex offense and press and score in transition. And that's what he lives and dies by. He swears by it.
Yep, absolutely. How about those Diamond Vols? They were supposed to go to Clemson and just get knocked out of the tournament, right? Wasn't that how things were supposed to go? Clemson hadn't lost since, I think, April the 28th at one point. They had players that could play, and it was a tough draw. And what did Tennessee do, Caleb? We'll discuss that after this with Zach Hare. He's our He has officially become our baseball analyst, so we're looking forward to that. And he's with Sports Treasures, so we'll tell you the latest there. We're excited about some things that we're going to be able to do with Sports Treasures working forward. So he's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. 2 minutes, and those Diamond Vols ain't dead yet, and they're not rounding second, giving everybody the single finger salute either, which is good. 2 minutes off the Hook Sports.
Sun, sand, and salt water, the beach is a very relaxing place. Unless you wear contacts. Ow! Open your eyes to the best the beach has to offer with LASIK vision correction from Campbell Cunningham Laser Center. Ah.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air. Dare to compare.
Our family has been creating one-of-a-kind pieces of jewelry in West Knoxville since 1986. Each piece is a combination of unique processes that bring your idea to life. Every day in our shop, a truly special item with a story all its own is being manufactured in our facility, bringing the history and family sentiment into a whole new generation of life. We're grateful that you chose us to be Knoxville's best jeweler, a title that we value and respect. Because to me, being a jeweler and owning a jewelry store are not the same thing. I'm Rick Terry. I'm a jeweler, and we want to be your jeweler. Kingston Pike and Campbell Station Road in the heart of Farragut, and downtown on Gay Street right next to the Tennessee Theater.
When you want a hard cider that's easy to enjoy, one that's crafted to perfection, you need Tennessee Cider Company. Some say it's the signature cider of the South. Others say it's the cure to your craving. They all say you'll savor every sip. With a selection of ciders free to sample, all it takes is one taste. Visit tncidercompany.com for more information, as well as to shop our ciders and merchandise online. Thirsty yet? Doors open at 10 a.m.
Welcome back. Zach here to join us very shortly as we get to the diamond. It's all on offthehooksports.com.
Who's this guy?
Hello, who is it?
The Dave Hooker Show,
Who?
a presentation of Off the Hook Sports, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and the free Off the Hook Sports app. Back to Dave Hooker.
Rebecca on the message board. Gimmick. The definition is trick or device intended to attract attention, publicity, or business. Innovation. Introducing new ideas, original and creative in thinking. So if you want to talk Josh Heupel's offense, some people like to say gimmicky. I would say innovative. Zach Hare joins us now with Sports Treasures. Excited to start working with him very soon. And we had Zach on last week, and it was obvious he knew the Diamond Vols and he knew the SoftVols as well. So we wanted to hit him up again this week, regardless of what happened over the weekend. But Zach, as it turns out, things worked out pretty well. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. How about you guys?
We're doing well. Tell us what's going on at Sports Treasures before we look at the Vols and SoftVols, the Diamond Vols, all the Vols, and what they might be able to do headed into June.
Yep. So the big one this week is Series 2 baseball comes out on, should be here Wednesday. So you'll have some of your bigger rookies in there. Anthony Volpe will be the big one for the Yankees. That's what we got going on this week. We had our anniversary sale last week. Got some leftovers still with as I was joking around here on our social media, it's we've got 3 racks of clothes up front of damaged, dirty, and slightly inappropriate clothing. And by slightly inappropriate, it's 2 racks full of Washington throwback Commanders.
Nice. Well, I've got some Hooker shirts if you want to go with inappropriate that I can hook you up with. Let's Let's get rolling with the Diamond Vols. I mean, there's every reason for them to go to Clemson, not have the excitement of last year. Clemson was on an incredible run. There's every reason for them to go to Clemson, and the season is over. And you say to yourself, well, it wasn't 2022, but kudos to them. They made a run, but they didn't do that. They had the right mindset going in. I know you've worked around the team before. What signs did you see that they had the right mindset early on?
I think really after the Vanderbilt game when they had hit the walk-off home run there, I think that's what turned it. And what Vanderbilt was doing at that point in time, I think that showed them, hey, what the media is saying, what our fans were saying leading into the season, we can do that. We have that capability. I mean, they're statistically looking, our bullpen is best in the country. I mean, you've got what should be 3 top half of the first round draft picks in this year, next year's draft with Burns at the time, who's now moved to the bullpen, but with Beam next year and Dolander this year and Andrew Lindsay just coming out of nowhere to really do what he's done, especially to be a Friday night starter in the SEC. It takes a nice little different person mentally to be a Friday night starter in the SEC. But I think that was when that hit, that proved that I think the players saw they could do it, and that they had gotten to the point before that home run of, hey, let's just go out there and have fun. And I think that was just two worlds colliding. It made a perfect storm.
So Zach, where does Zane Ditton's performance over the weekend rank in most clutch performances ever by a Tennessee athlete? I mean, I think Peerless Price, the 98 national title game.
Yeah.
Is that on that level?
It's I don't know if it's quite to that one. I would put it maybe a close to where Gilbert's grand slam was against I'm drawing a blank. Wagner, I believe it was 2 years. When we hit it to go on to win that first game of the regional a couple years ago. But definitely that was big. Him especially, being a transfer, and he's been a clutch player. Who I was watching the game on TV, talked about how he hit a walk-off grand slam, I believe it was, in Little League World Series as a kid. So he's always had that, what seems to be the clutch factor. I would definitely think baseball-wise, clutch is going to be in your top 5 or 6. I was a little young when Helton played here. I'm sure he had a few as well as Condridge. Maybe Dave knows some of those he can.
Thank you. Thank you. I was ready. Yes, I was at school during the Todd Helton years, but not the Condridge years.
And so, but overall, Tennessee, I think you'd be flirting with top 10. You've had some good football and basketball ones to go around. But that was definitely I was out mowing, listening to the game, came in to watch the 9th inning, and I had to apologize for my wife and vacuum up the grass that had fallen off of me after that home run afterwards.
Yeah, and John Wilkerson, always a great guy to listen to, another fantastic call over the weekend. So this team had so much pub around it last year, some good, some bad. Zach, how would you compare going into the second week of the playoffs with this kind of flying under the radar? May not be the right term, as opposed to rounding second and giving the one finger salute. I mean, how would you weigh both of those as far as your confidence level going into these games?
So obviously we're not sure if we're playing Penn or Southern Miss yet. If it's Penn, all things point to us being home. If it's Southern Miss, still up in the air. I would hope we would host either way, but I know Southern Miss has hosted in the past, so they do have the facilities large enough to host. Kind of a lot of things that it can, reminds me of, and you see a lot of times in sports is, the 98 national championship team in football. The 97 team was loaded, came up short. Last year's team was loaded. Obviously this baseball team had a lot more pressure coming in than the 98 Vols football team did. But I think you can see a lot of comparisons as the pieces are there, but they're more of a team. You don't have the personalities of Gilbert, and you don't have the personalities that Beck had, and those guys, you've got, I was at the first pitch banquet this year, and Burns was the player at my table, and he is extremely quiet, very laid back type of guy. And you see what he's on the mound, and you see that emotion. Dolander's kind of similar. He's a little bit quieter of a guy, but then you see him, see that emotion as well on the mound. And there's a lot of comparisons. I feel like this is more of a team that doesn't have the superstars. There's, last year, if you needed a big hit, you were waiting on Gilbert, Drew to come up to bat and make that big hit. This year, pretty much 1 through 9, they're all, I feel like, pretty close to that same level, can make a hit when you need it. And, Inslee on Saturday night was the one that got the hit to drive in Maui. Well, he was, I believe, 0 for 4, 0 for 5 before that hit. And he was, 1 for 17 his last few at-bats before that to step up and make that hit to get in. And so I think that flying under the radars helped them. After they fell early in the SEC season, they've picked back up. No one was really talking about them. Tennessee was the first team to clinch a spot in the Super Regionals.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I like where they're going, and I like what kind of matchup they're going to have, especially they can be at home for the Supers this coming weekend.
I know Caleb wants to jump into softball. I remind people that Sports Treasures right there on Broadway is your home for Tennessee memorabilia and more. They just have a fantastic store, whether it's cards or memorabilia, collectibles. You need to get to Sports Treasures on Broadway. Portions of the program also brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning. Integrity matters. Go to cityheatandair.com. Caleb, turn me to some softballs.
Before I get to softball, I just have to say one little thing, which is just to go back with a guy like Zane on the team. You're saying they're headed in one direction. Anybody?
Oh my gosh, is that like a pop music joke?
It's a boy. There was a boy band named One Direction with Harry Styles and a guy named Zane. So,
and now they all gone in their own direction.
They have.
Right.
They have. But the
The new
baseball
name
team
of the band is Separate Directions.
Yep.
The baseball team is still headed in one direction, though. So,
Go ahead, Caleb.
So, Zach, on the other side, does the softball team have any chance of beating Oklahoma or winning the College World Series with Oklahoma in there? Or is this like North Carolina women's soccer back in the day?
It's going to be tough when you got to beat them twice. There was an article here I believe it was the paper, Friday, Fridays when they played Oklahoma, I believe. And they talked about, I read through it, and Karen Wickett talked about how she had rested her 2 pitchers to basically save them for their 2 games coming up today, or game today and then possible game tomorrow against Florida State. Oklahoma is so good across the board. I don't know. I mean, you might get them once, but to have to beat them twice, it's kind of the old adage, if you beat them in game 1, they're going to be ticked off in game 2. Of course, anything happened in game 3, but then if they beat you in game 1, can you put it together for 2 back-to-back games? But I think it's going to be tough. I think Florida State will be they're a good matchup with Florida State, hopefully to at least get to the championship series, as they said multiple times on the TV this weekend with Charlotte. If Tennessee gets to the championship series, they'll have their chip in their chair, and that's all you can ask for.
Hey, Zach, I know you're at Sports Treasures right now, so we want to let you go here in a little bit, but there's a fine line between knocking on the door, like just every year, year in and year out, and then not winning a championship, and then it almost works against you. Where are the weeklies right now in your mind? Because they're knocking on the door. Reminds me of Florida State in the 90s, to date myself. And they're knocking on the door. Tennessee was one of those teams in the 90s. But at what point do you wonder, I'm not sure that they're going to actually be able to get it done for whatever reason?
I don't know if it's so much them, but the teams that are around them. I mean, if you look at what they have this year, pitching is phenomenal. They've got great hitting. They've got all the parts you're looking for. I think that, kind of like we said with UNC in the 90s with soccer, you're just facing a juggernaut, unfortunately, that you can't – I don't know what you can do to topple it, but I don't know, I think they can get it done here. We talked about, other week. I think they have the parts here, but I would say they're knocking. But until Oklahoma decides to give someone else a chance, I think that knocking on the door may be the ceiling.
All right, great stuff. Go ahead, Caleb.
I would just say, I would also point out that to think about women's sports, a lot of people don't know this because it's crazy to think about, but in the 70s and the 80s, Pat Summitt was knocking on the door a lot and could not get over the hump and win a national title.
Yep.
And then she won 8.
Yep.
Great point. All right, so what do we got going on, Zach, at Sports Treasures? People need to get down there now.
Yep. Yeah. Like I said, getting ready for should be Wednesday, should be here. Series 2 baseball. That's their big flagship, one of the big flagship products for the year. We'll have that in stock. A few other products come out this week. Geared up, getting towards the heart of baseball season, and then football season will be here before we know it.
Yeah, well, trust me.
We do have a bunch of UT signed mini helmets behind me that we got in this past weekend from somebody. So, yeah, the 98 championship guys.
Yeah, Zach had me in, and he just wanted me to sign a bunch of helmets. So,
yeah.
It actually devalued them tremendously.
Yep. So now our Hendon Hooker shirts are dual purpose now.
That's right. Dual hookers, whatever that means.
Yeah.
All right, Zach, have a blessed day, man. We appreciate you. Look forward to working with you.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys. Talk to you later.
Zach Harris, Sports Treasures. Portions of the program brought to you by Bassey Lawn and Garden. Man alive, it's worth the drive. Industrial commercial mowers, whether you're in Nashville, Knoxville, or Chattanooga, get to Cleveland, Tennessee for Bassey Lawn and Garden. Toro, count on it. So I'm going to give you one more chance to vote. Who goes further and or wins a championship, men or women, on the Diamond?
I'm going men because of what Zach talked about. Oklahoma is, they're like the Oklahoma football team of the 50s, that had that 47 straight game win streak with Bud Wilkinson. That's what Oklahoma softball is right now.
Or the Nebraska of the 90s that Tennessee ran into a couple of times.
That's true. Tennessee was better than that Nebraska team.
Yeah, shorter span, but
right.
They did what they did, and they were probably going to beat you at it.
Yeah, I just maintain that if Peyton Manning's not hurt and Tennessee has a defensive coordinator that knew anything about the triple option, Tennessee could have won that game.
What year?
98 Orange Bowl. Yeah.
97, 98.
97, 98. Yeah.
Well, Peyton shouldn't have played. He was also on David Letterman showing off his big swollen knee like 4 days before the game, which was not the smartest move in the world. I mean, his pants wouldn't wrap around his knee. Do you remember that?
I actually do, funny enough. And I actually remember there were questions about his NFL future because of that knee for a minute.
Yeah, it was a bursa sack. So there's one sack you don't want to hurt. It's a bursa sack.
That ain't the only sack you want.
He's Caleb Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. Weekdays at 10 o'clock. This has been a presentation of Off